Hey there, folks, and welcome back to another episode of Friday Night Spotlight, brought to you by 911 Air Repair, your local air conditioning experts specializing in maintenance, repair, and new installations. We are past the halfway mark here now in the season. It is week 7 for our smaller schools and week 6 for our 4 and 5A teams. And speaking of 4A teams, we have another matchup this week. Our game of the week is between Mesa, Eastmark, and Poston Butte. Now, David, you just had a chance to see Poston Butte this past week. What are you seeing from them at this point right now?
You know, it's kind of the same story that it has been for the last couple of years, I would say. It's run the ball and run the ball a lot because these guys love to do that, and they've done it forever, and they're going to continue to kind of have that game plan. So, Poston Butte is definitely going to be a team that you're going to have to look out for, especially on the ground, and especially with a quarterback now they have is Mason Lloyd. Mason, he got the starting nod a little bit last year, and he showed us some potential, but I think now is kind of the year where he's really starting to put things together. He looked really solid against Coconino. His big calling card is he's able to run really well, and that really fits in with the Poston Butte system. Scored 2 touchdowns with his feet last week against Coconino. Coconino is definitely a solid team, and it's a good win for them. When they were towards the end of the game, Poston Butte had their break, and they chanted back on track, and I think that's kind of how they feel right now after that win, where they're kind of getting their feet wet and finally starting to realize what works for them and what they can and cannot do, and that's definitely going to feed into this game against Eastmark because Eastmark is going to be a tough team. Eastmark was a very solid team last year. They moved up a conference. They're going to be a serious threat to them, and to see kind of where the balancing act is with Poston Butte, especially for teams coming off of a good win, but they got to continue to ramp it up a little bit. Eastmark's definitely going to be a challenge. I'm going to take Poston Butte in this one just because I like the momentum they're at right now. They have a good, solid core group. Their running back rooms are always loaded, and it's no different this year. A guy that I really have my eyes on is Ja'Kai Robertson. He's been doing it on both sides of the ball. He's been a really talented runner, but is a very special defensive back for them who can really, dominate the game and also just be a game changer for them. So I really liked what they got so far. They have the right pieces. It's just about putting them all together and trying to perform a good win against Eastmark. I think they got the chance.
Now, looking at Eastmark, like David mentioned, this is their first year in 4A. They currently have a 3-2 record, but those 2 losses come against two very good competitive teams. First one is against Oro Valley, Canyon del Oro. They just lost 21-14, and then this last one, just this past week, is against Phoenix Northwest Christian, 37-35. So this Eastmark can score. They can score often. I got a chance to see them for a half, because that's how long the game lasted when they played Combs a couple weeks back, and the game was called because of an incoming storm with the monsoon season. But just looking at them, they have a lot of different weapons. Quarterback Mason Jensen has over 700 passing yards, 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. His go-to guys on the other end, Jackson Bailey and Maximo Cano. They have combined for those 9 touchdowns and around 500 or so receiving yards. And then Coleman Samples, he is their lead running back, 496 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns. Key here, though, for Eastmark is their defense. 2 guys really got to point out. Carson Miner, 32 tackles, 14 of those are for a loss. He has 7 sacks for 51 yards. And then his brother, Colin, 4 interceptions and 61 yards. These 2 guys are going to be key. David mentioned Poston Butte's running game. They're going to have to get into the backfield, try to slow them down, get those tackles for a loss, which they are capable of. So this is just going to be a really fun and high-energy game, I believe. Contrary to what David said, I think Eastmark has the upper hand here. They haven't really proven otherwise that, they can't handle this type of situation. Transitioning over, we're going to do things a little differently this week. We're not going to give you guys our additional games to watch. Instead, because we're past the halfway mark, we're going to kind of give you guys the good, the bad, and the ugly here with our Pinal County teams. David, what teams have kind of surprised you most so far?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the good. It's not necessarily what they've surprised me for. Florence is definitely going to be up there. We talked about them numerous times throughout this season, and we're going to keep talking about them because they're one of the best teams in 3A, and they've proven it so far. Rankings just came out today. They're at the time we're recording. They're inside the top 10 right now, looking really solid. They got really solid pieces around, and the only hiccup on this team's record so far has been that really good game up in Flagstaff against Valley Christian. So, and even in that game, they were in it the entire time. They had a chance to win it 2 times. They just couldn't get it done. So, this team has been able to perform. They're riding high off the winning the rivalry battle between Coolidge and Florence. So that's definitely going to be something that's going to elevate them and continue to ride the momentum throughout the year. So not necessarily a surprise, but what was a surprise for me this year has been Vista Grande. Vista Grande, I wasn't necessarily expecting an undefeated season. I was expecting a good season, but I mean, having no losses so far has been a really good step for Vista Grande. I think they're starting to finally take that leap of where they can be and kind of establishing themselves in the conference. So I expect good things out of them to continue. I think they need to make sure that they can continue to find those pieces and rely on those guys that they're going to have throughout the rest of the year. So those have been the 2 really big moments for me. But I also want to shout out our 2A team, Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz Valley has done really well so far. They only have 1 loss on the season. And I think there were still a lot of questions going into the year, depending on where Santa Cruz sits. I mean, last year they didn't start off so hot, but they were able to rail off about 5-6 straight wins. Still didn't, unfortunately, make it to the playoffs, but I think that is definitely something that's been feeding them and has been, egging them on throughout this year, that they want to finally get back there to a point where this team was back in 2020 when they went all the way and won a 2A state title. So I think they definitely have the right mentality as well. I think they're going to have some serious competition coming up. They're going to have a lot of tough opponents, but if they can keep riding high, and I think they definitely have a good shot of making it to that playoffs, it's just going to come down to the big games at the end of the year. They're going to have some tough games that they're going to have to perform well in and perform well against these solid groups they're going to have to go up with. So I'm going to give you my 3. That's what I like so far from these guys. I'm going to take the positive route, and I really like these guys, and I think they can continue to do more.
All right, one team I got to throw in there. If we were to give mid-season awards, I would say our most improved award goes to the Maricopa Rams. Maricopa has kind of turned their season around. They are currently 2-3. They are on a bye this week, but I think just looking at their schedule, if they can take this week to kind of regroup, repurpose themselves. They're probably dealing with injuries, a bit banged up at this point, but I think, looking ahead at the second half of their season, they can finish this year 5-5, which is a big deal for this Maricopa team. Another bright side for them is they're relatively young, a lot of juniors and sophomores on this team, so the future is just bright. If Maricopa can set the building blocks this season, who knows what they will be capable of next year. Now, David was our positive, bright sunshine here. I'm going to rain on your guys' parade here for some of our other teams. Kind of surprised here that they're not doing so well is in our 4A conference, and that is Combs and Apache Junction. Both of these teams are currently 1-4, which I think, neither one of us kind of expected that from them. Yes, Combs graduated a bunch of their playmakers from last year, but then also injuries have been a big problem for them early on in the season. So not really what they expected, and so now they're having all these younger guys who aren't as experienced having to step up and play at the varsity level. For Apache Junction, they essentially lost their whole offense. Guys graduated, others transferred, but they haven't been doing so bad. If you look at their stats, quarterback Aiden DeLeon has 830 passing yards, 11 touchdowns, 1 interceptions. Evan Dela Cruz does a phenomenal job of backing him up with the run game, but I don't know what's missing with this AJ team. Maybe it's defense, or maybe, it's a little lack of spark, but given how these guys have been performing, there really shouldn't be a reason for such lopsided scores for them. So we're gonna have to keep an eye out on them for the rest of the season. Overall, David, is there anything else you would like to add?
I think we kind of covered. I think we have a lot of teams that have over-exceeded our expectations, and a lot of teams that haven't met them yet, but it's still early. We're at the halfway point a little bit, so there's still time to finally kind of find those pieces and continue to, strive for better, so we'll see what happens.
Real quickly, here are our picks for this week. Got to point out we have a couple teams missing that are going to be on buys this week, buys next week, and the buys on the week after that. So, hey, our game coverage is getting a bit slimmer, but, the exciting times are coming up as teams are trying to make that final push for a playoff position. As always, be sure to tune in to Pinal Central for all of your local sports coverage.